Yeah, I'm cynical enough to think that people just refuse to get concerned about something unless it's really dramatic. But maybe one thing that does get to people are their annual home insurance premiums, which have jumped up significantly with the increase in hurricanes, tornadoes, storms, fires, and that sort of thing. Maybe we can hit them in the
Yeah,
pocketbook.
yeah, if people would only make the connection.
Hello, I'm Beverly Crosby, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Let me ask you some questions. Have you noticed our weather patterns changing? Do you know the difference between global warming, climate change? And are these man-made conditions, or is it just nature being nature? Well, today, our topic is going to be about global warming and climate change. And with us is the Sibley High School Minnesota State debate team who competed and placed in their state tournament back in 1968. These guys have maintained their friendship over all of these years. And yet today, some of them are still debating in competition and doing quite well, might I add. So, with that, welcome Randy, welcome Mordecai, Mike, David, and Stan. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Let's take a look first at climate change. Would someone like to explain what that means?
Well, if I may, my general understanding is that climate refers to the weather over long periods of time and across great swaths of territory. And the kind of effects it seems to be having within the last century or the last 50 years is more and more of the ice that's located near the North and South Pole is melting away. There's more flooding as a result. Temperatures seem to be rising on average. And there are even some fires, more apparently than have been common, and I think including one out near where Stan lives not so long ago. And just one other factor which covers a long period of time is that since the beginning of the industrial age, scientists have declared that there's 50% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than there was before the industrial age. So we have, 1.5 times as much carbon dioxide as was natural 1,000 years ago.
Randy, did you have anything to add to that? I know you shared some thoughts earlier.
Um, well, one thing is that in the period of time that Michael was just talking about, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, uh, not only has the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere gone up, but the average temperature around the Earth has gone up about 2 degrees. Now, my reaction to that is sort of twofold. One is, yeah, 2 degrees, so what? Um, but if you think about how big the Earth is and how much atmosphere we've got, and how much of a planet we have to, warm or cool, and you think about that going up 2 degrees over the course of less than a century, that's an enormous change.
Other
So,
thoughts?
Mhm. Well, I think in terms of the program title, that's debatable. It's really not debatable that the mean temperature has been going up on the planet. That's a given. Every scientist concurs with that. And even, looking at Minnesota, where we can remember when we were wee lads and the winters were colder. And I know I accessed a site a while back from the National Weather Service, And there's in Minnesota 22 different statistical indicators that clearly demonstrate that winters are not as severe as they were when we were kids. All of that sort of thing is indisputable. What is in dispute is what is the cause of this increase. And that's where the debatable part is. Is human activity really responsible for this? And I think that's where we need to focus our attention because it's a given that the temperature has been rising. That's almost indisputable.
Uh, just to comment on something Randy was saying, I saw a study where it's kind of generally agreed that during the lifetime of the five of us debaters on the screen, the temperature has risen about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit across the world. And so that just shows that it's happening even as, we sit here.
The greenhouse gases, if I can just get that in there. Our atmosphere is holding more greenhouse gases, and that has been attributed to, as both Mike and Randy said, the start of the Industrial Revolution and burning oil and other combustible substances. But I think probably overall the burning of oil and oil products like gasoline has driven those gases into the atmosphere, which warms the atmosphere, which traps heat and causes global warming and the climate changes that we see.
Yeah. But the debatable issues are how harmful is this? And is it due to human activity? And even the question of how harmful it is, I think is sort of an interesting one. There are those people I think who are kind of on the edge, on the fringe here, who use the term that this is an existential threat to the planet or to human existence. I'm not sure at this point I'm willing to go that far. It's kind of hard to kill off 8 billion people with weather changes. That said, there are a lot of other impacts of this change in our atmosphere and in our climate and in our weather that are harmful. And I think it's trying to sort out which ones are really should be our concern and which ones are a little bit over the top because predicting the future is a little dicey. And I really do wince a little anytime somebody says that the human race is going to come to an end because of global warming. I don't think that's the case.
Well, if we don't do anything to curb this ever increasing heating of the planet, well, then the time will come when it'll just burst into flames. I mean, so we do the things we're trying to do now with electric cars and trying to capture the sunlight, the energy from the sunlight. Those are things we're going to have to pursue at a vigorous rate, I would say.
Yeah. Well, we've got something to debate here. I personally don't think the whole planet is going to burst into flames. I think there are going to be consequential things, as Randy said, about hurricanes, about adverse weather impacts, uh, perhaps more fires in certain areas. But the idea that the planet is just going to become a cinder, a ginormous cinder, to me is not a supportable conclusion from what we're seeing right now, unless you're thinking out like 100,000 years or something like that. I might change my opinion, but in the foreseeable future, that's, in my opinion, not something that is going to happen, and that's just kind of over dramatization of a real problem that we have. But I worry that some people will be unreceptive to it if they think the claim is too extreme. They say, you got to be kidding me. No, it's not. The planet is not going to come to an end.
Well, Dave, let's see where you stand on this. A study by Yale, a Yale institution, and they usually one will say one either believes or disbelieves in climate change and global warming. They made it much more precise, and they divided people into 6 different categories. So let's see which one you think you're in. The first is alarmed about global warming. The second is concerned about global warming. The third is cautious about it. I think it's happening. I'm not too sure. The fourth is disengaged, not dealing with it directly. The next one is doubtful about the problems caused by global warming. And the final one is dismissive about the possibility of things happening. So we're.
I'd put myself in the concern category, but I'd also say, to my way of thinking, public opinion polls are largely irrelevant to all of this. People do not have the expertise to be making these kinds of judgments. We should be turning to climate scientists to give us the best sense of what's going on here. And asking people what they think, to me, is interesting from a voting standpoint or something, but it's not useful in terms of determining the truth of the matter, because that's just what people think. And most people, including all of us, probably don't have the expertise that climatologists do. And so that's where I go with COVID. That's where I go with, just about any issue I can think of. Let's go with the experts rather than asking, the man on the street what they think. So I kind of dismiss that whole thing as being not important to what we're talking about.
I'd like, and Randy, you can start, but I also want to hear from Mordecai and Stan. I want to get their viewpoints in as well. But go ahead, Randy.
I was my view is that if we're looking at the experts and what the experts have to say about this topic, uh, it's not really debatable anymore. The scientific consensus really has solidified that the planet is warming and that it's due to human activity. Yes, the oil companies can buy an expert, somebody with something behind their names, who says that this isn't true, that human activity has nothing to do with the warming of the planet, and or says the planet isn't warming at all. I think that my sense is that that position is basically held in scorn by the vast majority of the experts in this field.
I'll mention that our government, the U.S. government, is doing its part uh, as far as climate denial. In December, they dismantled the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And last month, the Trump administration repealed the endangerment finding, which undergirds basically all environmental protection laws. So we have a president who loves beautiful, clean coal and recently received an award as the champion of clean coal. And several of us have children and grandchildren, and I'm alarmed that the environment is being degraded, and wonder what kind of a world we're leaving for our grandchildren.
Dan?
Yeah, I would say I'm alarmed. I agree with Randy that the the consensus among climate scientists is that global warming is happening, climate change is happening, and it's due to human activity. And I also have fears connected to what Mordecai just told us, that our own government is standing in the way of making things better. In his first term, President Trump withdrew from the Paris Accords, which was an international agreement to pursue certain climate goals, goals in terms of emissions, harmful emissions. And the United States should be leading that task, not trying to stand in the way. Especially since the United States, I guess I've read two things. Are we the second worst polluter in the world next to China?
It's number one, yes.
Is that how it goes? Yeah. And I have children and grandchildren, and I am fearful. I have a brand new granddaughter who's going to be 3 months old this week. And I fear for what she's going to have to put up with in her lifetime with regard to climate change and global warming. And I live in Northern California. Mike mentioned the fires that we've had here, which thankfully, I mean, the big fire where I live was in 2017. It was at the end of a drought. And there have been huge fires in neighboring states, neighboring areas, and neighboring states, Oregon, Washington. And in Minnesota, you guys, as I recall, suffered the effects of huge fires in Canada with smoke coming in, all of which can be attributable to global warming and climate change. I mean, it's hard. What I read is it's hard with any individual event to parse out the causes as between global warming and, well, there was a drought here for a little while. But generally speaking, across the world, in Europe too, they're seeing crazy weather. And in the desert areas, more drought and spreading of deserts. So I'm alarmed.
We're seeing effects now from drought and flooding, drought in Africa, forcing people to move. If the sea level rises, low-lying areas are going to be flooded, which is going to have a huge social impact. Country like Bangladesh, low-lying area, where are 100 million people going to move to? Or where will people in New York City move to if the Atlantic Ocean rises and floods the city?
Yeah, and it's not just Bangladesh. I just read that 40% of the US population lives in coastal counties. Think about that. And the level of sea level rise is predicted or estimated to be anywhere between a foot and 6 feet by the end of the century. That's scary. There are a lot of places where a lot of people live where they're not going to be able to live anymore, and that's in this country.
So what do you think? Unfortunately, there's no easy fix. But what do you think? Two things. What is being done and what could be done, in your opinion?
Well, most nations that have signed the Paris Accords, which is basically every other nation on the planet except the US, have been doing things to promote the right kind of energy sources that are either solar or wind or geothermal. They have a ginormous percentage of the vehicles are electrically powered vehicles. And, there are things that can be done. Unfortunately, these, like the increase in the temperature itself, which was gradual, and hard to kind of identify at any one point that it's really getting bad. Reversing this will also be every bit as gradual too. So people will have to be very patient. And if they expect an instant fix for this, there isn't one.
Yeah, well, just one observation from a slightly different direction is that while people, generally speaking, agree that global warming is a scientific thing that's happening, they often don't talk about it around the dinner table because it's one of those really divisive issues that, like politics or religion, you just can batter your head with them all day long. So my suggestion would just be let's learn everything we can and then just go on with our lives as carefully as we can.
Yeah, well, of course,
There is this,
people do not want to learn what they should learn. And even I forget the famous episode, one of our US senators walking into a Senate hearing on global warming. It had snowed in Washington, D.C., and he brought in a snowball as visual proof that global warming was kind of a hoax. If we're at that level of discussion on this subject, we are really nowhere. And so, the dinner table discussion should be who really knows about this so we can learn something, because swapping our own opinions, frankly, to me is not very useful. And again, we have in our culture a very anti-intellectual tradition of dismissing people who are scientists. Look at Dr. Fauci during COVID and how he was regarded as, this devil figure. And so we have not given credence to people who have spent their careers investigating transmissible diseases or investigating global warming. Until we consult with those people and take them seriously, I don't know that the dinner table conversations are really going to be any different.
there is a strain in our politics, uh, the Christian nationalist faction that is looking at the second coming of Jesus, and that there's really nothing to worry about because the rapture is coming. And I go back 40 years attending a press conference with James Watt, who was the Reagan Secretary of the Interior. And he articulated this, that the second coming is imminent and we can use up the natural environment. Everything's here for our benefit and we don't have to worry about the consequences of our actions. So this is kind of embodied in Project 2025, which is the blueprint for the Trump 2.0 administration. This is coming from the Heritage Foundation and other right-wing groups, including the climate denial faction. And there's really no effective pushback in our politics right now. We just have one crazy thing happening, one thing after another. In Minnesota, we had the ICE invasion, all this political repression, and people being shot down on the streets of Minneapolis. And I think last Saturday, the US launched a war against Iran. US and Israel attacked Iran. And we hear like every day there's a different rationale for that. And who knows what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, well, you think of how important global warming could turn out to be, and then ask, how much did Biden and Trump talk about it during the last presidential election? And the answer is practically not at all. It's just not something, it's not like Ralph Nader is here or something like that. It just isn't being talked about that much right now.
Yeah. Well, it's a little like the frog in the body of water that keeps being heated 1 degree at a time, and you don't notice it in a dramatic way. And eventually, the frog is sitting there in very hot water and it expires. But along the way, you don't really feel it in the way that perhaps you ought to.
I was just at a talk, kind of a semi-humorous talk that was given last week by uh, the basically the state climatologist, the person who is the climatologist for the DNR, uh, and he titled it "Disaster is the Best Medicine." Um, and his point, not in an area that he's an expert in exactly, but had to do with how people react to climate change and how people react to situations generally. And basically, unless it's a disaster that directly affects them, um, they tend to blow it off.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, people who live in Minnesota are going to blow it off more. We're in the middle of the continent. We're not on any seashore. We haven't had some of the dire things that have happened. In fact, an argument has been made, and it's probably correct in some ways, that by having a more temperate climate, the growing season in Minnesota is actually longer and more beneficial for our crops. Now, I'm not here to say that's absolutely right, but it's an interesting point that if you live in the Midwest, you may be inclined to dismiss this. But if you're living down in Austin, Texas, and it's 108 degrees every day, you're going to look at it a little bit differently.
There's talk now and then about people, scholars of fascism who are leaving the United States, moving to Canada or the UK or wherever. But with climate change, we really need to find another planet. But as the environmentalists say, there's no planet B.
On that note, that was a good one, Mordecai. Well, this is what That's Debatable is all about. We're trying to bring awareness. We're trying to bring different thoughts, different opinions, different viewpoints to our viewers so they can think about where they stand, what they believe. So with that, I'm going to thank Randy, Mordecai, Michael, David, and Stan. Thank you for being here and sharing. I would ask that the viewers go ahead and press the like button for our show. We are open to other thoughts, so make sure that you share this podcast with your friends, with people that you think might be interested in it as well. And with that, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.